In this video, we're going to tie a fly called the hood rat. It's a lifelike mouse pattern, great for trout or pike or musky or bass. First thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the tail. We're just going to use some brown ultra chenille. And you got to be careful you don't make this tail too long. If you make it too long, you can make it as long as you want, but you're going to get a lot of short strikes. A lot of the fish are just going to sit there and nip at that back of that tail. So what I like to do is actually tie a tail in that's not too long. I like it to be about 1.5 to 2 times the length of the shank of the hook. There's one length, there's roughly 2. And if you want to make it a little shorter, you can do about 1.5 lengths. We're just going to tie that ultra chenille in here at the bend of the hook. Make sure it's not going to come out. And you can trim off the excess. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the kind of the back of the mouse, and for that we're going to use some 2mm foam. And you can use a lot of different colors. You can use brown, black, tan, kind of whatever color you like the looks of. I've been tying them in tan. Those seem to work pretty well. And what I've actually done is I've taken a piece of 2mm foam and I've doubled it over. This just helps the fly float a little better. You can also use a single piece of foam if you're tying them in a smaller size. I'm using a Tiemco 8089 kind of a bass hook. And you can use a size 2 for your pike musky, or a size 6 for your big trout, or a size 10 for just kind of your regular trout. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this foam and we're going to tie it in right at the back. And I cut out a pretty big piece of foam, about the gap of the hook. You can see how wide that piece of foam is. It's going to help give us the profile on the mouse that we're looking for. And you just kind of bind it down, trying to keep things as even on each side as possible. Don't be too worried about the looks of the fly at this point. This whole entire underbody that you can see here with all my thread wraps is all going to be covered up at the end of the fly, so you don't have to worry too much about that ugliness. You just want to make sure that you tie that foam right on the top. And when you fold it over, it folds over nice and even. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to tie in the kind of the legs or the body of the fly, the parts that give it movement. I'm going to use some Zonker rabbit strips here, and I'm going to use kind of the Chinchilla color. That's the color I like, but you can also use a Grizzly color. That's also a good color as well. You can use tan, you can use brown, but the Chinchilla kind of has that natural variation to it that looks pretty mouse-like. And we're actually going to tie these in, so you can see here all those fibers lay back onto the strip. So the idea is when I take this strip and I fold it forward on the side of the fly, I want all that hair to lay back just like that. So I kind of have to tie everything in backwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie it in by the back end. I'm just going to pull all that hair forward. And I'm going to tie it with the kind of the leather strip facing out, facing towards me, and on the other side facing towards you. And the reason being is when I pull that rabbit strip forward now and fold it over, everything's going to lay nice and flush against the body of the fly. You kind of have to keep all that rabbit kind of out of your way once you tie it in. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Same thing with the flesh part pointing away. So this side would be towards you on the camera. And that way when I pull it over, you can see all those strips face the way I want them to. Now the next part, we're going to tie in the belly of the fly. So I've cut these little pieces of 2mm foam. I've cut them about 1/4 to a little bit more than a quarter, 3/8 of an inch or so wide. And these I'm going to tie backwards on the fly. And I'm going to kind of do the same technique where I'm going to tie them down kind of underneath the fly, slightly at an angle. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So when I mean downward at an angle, so I'll turn the fly kind of upside down, so when I pull these foam strips forward, like that, they're going to make the belly of the fly. And I kind of want to tie them at a downward angle so that they cover everything up on the underside of the fly. So you kind of want to get them close together. I can see one. I didn't quite get enough of a downward kind of angle on it, so I can just reposition it. And now, for the most part, we're kind of done building the pieces of the fly that we're going to finish with. The next step will now be to just build an underbody. So this fly has quite a bit going on, and you don't want it to sink on you when you're fishing it. So all that zonker strip and kind of the mass of the fly will soak up some water. So what we're going to do is I just tie in a couple extra strips of foam here. We're just going to build up an underbody that'll help kind of bulk up the mass of the fly, but this foam is also going to help make it float. Now, in previous videos, you've probably seen me use some chenille, which works fine, but I found the chenille does soak up water, and it makes the fly a little heavier. So what I've started to do is tie the underbody with foam. Again, it doesn't matter what this underbody looks like. We're going to cover all of this up, so you just kind of bulk it up. Looks pretty ugly. You want to make it kind of as even as you can. You can go through with a couple of thread wraps to just help secure it, and also put some tension on areas that you need to cinch down a little more. But don't be too worried if it's ugly, because you're not going to see any of that. Now, the next step is to build the belly of the fly, and we're going to use these foam strips first. So I'm going to take these foam strips and pull them together, and I'm going to kind of look at the underside of the fly as I'm pulling them, just to make sure I get good coverage on the underside of that fly. I'm going to pinch them in place at the front end of the fly. And you're going to end up with a belly. Looks like that. Now, the next step is to take those rabbit strips and you're going to pull them right over kind of the foam belly we made. So you're just going to pull them over just like that. And we're going to peel away some of the fibers towards the front so that expose the leather kind of right where I'm going to bite in with my thread. And I'm going to do the same on the other side here. Just kind of take your time at this point. You want to make sure everything seats correctly at this stage of the fly. And you can trim out your rabbit. Then a couple tight wraps just to help secure that rabbit down. Now, the next step is, I'm just kind of making sure everything is lining up here the way I want it to. Next step is to make kind of the little head portion of the mouse, and I'm going to use these foam pieces here to do that. I'm going to take these foam pieces and I'm going to double them back over so that it makes a little loop kind of on the front of the fly. And these help kind of make the fly wake across the surface of the water. And I make them so that they make a little loop just a little bit shorter than the eye of the hook. I want to make them kind of as evenly sized as possible, which takes a little bit of kind of practice. There we go. And then I'm going to pull over the top of the mouse. That big wide piece of foam there. I'm going to do a nice loose wrap of thread over the top of it. And then I'm going to pull down, cinch it all down. And then we can whip finish. I like to use a nice big giant whip finisher so I can kind of get over that foam. And this foam is a little bigger, so what you can do is just give it a little bit of a haircut. We're going to trim it again here in a second, but that'll just help my whip finisher slide over it. Then we need to trim our little kind of legs of the mouse here, if that's what you want to call them. And just kind of trim the underside, and you can round off these little pieces of foam if you want. This part is just kind of looks, whatever you like the looks of. You can just cut them nice and short like that. That'll help kind of let the fly wake. And then we could trim the top portion. What I kind of do is I grab the middle of the foam and just tug on it, put my scissors up against where I want it to cut, and I'm going to cut it so that I have a little bit of a lip, about that big or so. I just want it to overhang kind of that wake portion of the fly there, and that's kind of acts like a little popper or a little lip. If you want a really aggressive popping action, you can leave a little bit more of a lip. If you don't want it, you can probably leave a little bit less of a lip. I usually like a little bit of popping action, kind of gurgles as you're waking it across the surface. I'm just going to pull on it and give a nice even cut straight across, and pulling on the middle will just kind of slightly round off each end, kind of giving a nice taper. So you just kind of pull on the end as you cut, and that gives you kind of a nice rounded finish. And this fly looks a little poofy when it's not in the water, but once you get this thing in the water, it swims just like a mouse. A lot of guys I've seen started to incorporate stinger hooks and things into the fly. I haven't really figured out a perfect way to do that. The best thing I do is just shorten that tail so that it's not too long. If you let it hang out there, they'll just start nipping at it, short striking the tail. But a stinger hook definitely helps. I just haven't really been able to find one that works really well without kind of affecting the action of the fly or how it floats. So with this fly, I've had good success on aggressive fish, great bass fly as well. Seen a lot of guys starting to use it for bass. Good musky fly, and that is the hood rat.